2 days.
All right, I'm gonna try to do the world speed record on talking about biodiversity. This is the last video on things that we do to interfere with ecosystems, and here we go. So biodiversity, what is it? Well, oh wow, it's got flashing animations. So what do you notice between these two pictures? A and B. Well, I guess we could sit here and wait for chat, but we'll just help you out here a little bit. Everything in A, well, they kind of look the same, don't they? Everything in B, we have some variety, don't we? How about here? Well, I mean, this one has a lot more animals, but they all kind of look the same, don't they? And then this one here, we might have less animals, but we got some different kinds, don't we? All right, here, lots of plants, but they all look like the same kind of plant. We're here, you know, a little less organized, but we have lots of different kinds of plants here. We get in the trend here. Here, oh, cool, lots of fish, but they all look the same. Or here, we have different kinds of fish hanging out. All right. So what do we think biodiversity means? Well, it's kind of built in the name, isn't it? Bio means things that are alive, life, right? Living, bio. And then diversity means variety. So if we put biodiversity together, biodiversity is the variety of life on Earth. But we can also say it's the variety of life in a given area that we want to talk about. And so biodiversity is just the number of types of species and the number of individuals that make up the population in an ecosystem. And that's what biodiversity is. Generally speaking, high biodiversity means things are really healthy and they're more sustainable ecosystems. So the higher the biodiversity, the more sustainable. And that's one of the key things we look at to see about the health of an ecosystem is it biologically diverse?
And I think it should say the number of unique individuals.
Right.
Because you get clones of plants all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Number of different.
Yeah.
Right.
Number
Yeah.
of
It should be. Yeah.
unique individuals. Yeah.
Or individual species, right? Yeah.
Well, different types of species, but you're also looking at the variety of individuals. So, like the genetics behind it. So, like if you were to look at our classroom, we're all unique. We're all different.
Right.
Whereas
Right,
if we were clones of each other, then we're not unique individuals.
So you can almost say the genetic diversity.
Yes. Yeah. Just genetic diversity.
That's how I always understood it, was genetic diversity.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's estimated 14 million species or so of animals, just animals. I mean, if we get into like bacteria and all that stuff, I mean, that number goes up through the roof. In fact, this number is probably a very low estimate, actually. You know,
depends on extinction now.
Yeah, and if you look at some trees in the rainforest, each tree will have its own little, you know, it's depending on how you want to slice up the species, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then, so 14 million species of animals on Earth that depend on 300,000 different species of plants. So for every 47 animal species, you have one plant species. The way to think about it is for every plant species, you have 47 animal species that rely on it. I mean, it's not quite one-on-one because most animals will rely on multiple different kinds of plants, but that's generally right. So if we lose one plant species, we're going to lose biodiversity of 47 animal species. Okay. Now there's some areas that are more diverse than others. Like we have these wonderful forests up here in Ontario, and they're pretty diverse. But compared to a rainforest, it has very low diversity, right? So different systems have different levels. Like a desert is not as diverse as, let's say, you know, a little estuary or a coral reef, right? So you just got to keep that in mind. That diversity isn't kind of equally spread throughout everywhere. Some places have more than others. Okay, so number of species known. So we have a whole bunch of fungi, a whole bunch of different kinds of algae. Look at this, insects, right? Right. I mean, again, that's a low number, but I mean, insects. I mean, I think out of insects though, like 2/3 of that is what, beetles, right?
I think so.
There's more variety of beetles than there's anything on Earth, really.
Yeah, and it's so hard to determine species when it comes to insects.
Yeah.
They don't travel very far, so there's a lot. There's probably a ton more than that.
Yeah, like I heard there's like 10 million different kinds of beetles on Earth, or estimated. So anyways, there you go. But you notice like the smaller ones, you know, anyways, a lot of variety and mostly insects. Oh, there's viruses. Nice. We can add one to that, right? Okay, so plant diversity. So like I said, rainforests, they contain the largest amount, where the Arctic and Antarctic have relatively the least amount. Here's the hot zones for biodiversity. You notice always along coastal waters, typically within the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, so within 30 degrees of latitude from the equator, mostly because they get more light and they're near the ocean. So lots here, lots here. There's the forest of Borneo, right? Really cool. So, Europe's pretty good. That's like California, Yucatan. Okay? If you go to California, they have rainforests in California. So, and there you go. That's the big hot zones for diversity. So, 3 components to biodiversity. 1, diversity of the genes. All dogs came from the same kind of pool of wolves. They all came from wolves. And there's a really good what's it called, Cosmos episode on this where it talks about that. And so like the little Chihuahua came from the same ancestors as Rottweilers, right? But they're not all the same because over time their genes have kind of drifted apart. So even though they came from one wolf, they developed into being a diverse kind of group of species, right? So that's diversity of genes within a species. Okay, then we have diversity of species. So you think of like you have the monkeys, the skimmers, and a meadow beauty. They might all be in the same habitat, but they're definitely different species. So you can have different species, and then you can have different ecosystems. Okay? Like that looks like something out of Star Wars. Right? The planet Dagobah. Right? Yeah, Yoda sitting in there somewhere, I guess, or the plain prairie, or you can have like a little marshland. Okay. And so you can have a variety of ecosystems. So you can have a variety within species, you can have a variety between species, and then you can have a variety between ecosystems, because they're clearly going to have different species in them as well. Okay? Again, this is the quick tour, folks. So which one of these has more cultural diversity? Well, I think it's kind of obvious, right? B, we hope. And which one has more biodiversity? Well, it's going to be B, right? You have more different diversity. Now, I mean, I guess all these sheep could have different genes, and if you have 1,000,000 sheep versus 10 animals, maybe you can make an argument for A, but we're going to go with B here, right? Because there's a more variety of species. And then which one? Well, definitely the forest here, right? These ones are all clones, probably, of each other. And this one definitely has more biodiversity. And between the little school of fish versus the coral reef with different fish species, well, it's definitely going to be the coral reef will have more biodiversity as well. So what do we get from biodiversity? Why is biodiversity important? Well, let's look at it. Oxygen, food, clean water, medicine. So you are, sorry, shouldn't have gone so fast. A biodiverse ecosystem is going to be healthier, so more plants, more oxygen being produced. Again, if it's healthier, you're going to have more growing going on, so you're going to make more food. One of the big things that plants and animals like to do is they'll clean their own system, right? So, I mean, if you have kind of nutrients and stuff being thrown in the water to make the water dirty, you'll have something that says, hey, I will use that as my food and clean it up for you, right? So if you have some biodiversity, remember the Asian carp were introduced to clean up water? There you go. Medicine, we get a lot of our medicine from plants. And the more variety of plants you have, the more medicines you can find. Aesthetics, I mean, I always thought like a nice, beautiful rainforest always looked better than a tree farm, right? And then, well, I don't know what they're getting at with ideas. Do you have any ideas?
Oh, so like looking at how animals and things live, right? In terms of how a wing works, that's how we figured out how to fly. And like, so by studying nature, we get ideas for inventions and things like that.
Right. Darwin and his finches, right? So the whole idea behind evolution and stuff came from Darwin looking at some finches with different shaped beaks and the kind of seeds that they're able to eat and looking at patterns of their population over courses of years and stuff. Yeah. So
well, even things like solar panels, right? Looking at how a leaf catches sunlight, they took that and they're modernizing solar panels so that we can catch sunlight and things like that. So just new inventions come from nature.
Nice. Awesome. So there you go. Lots of cool ideas that come from biodiversity. Nature figured it out before we did, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so biodiversity happens because things rely on each other to survive. Okay? Everything in that ecosystem has a little role, and something else relies on it. It's not one thing is off on its own. And we even saw like a little bit of this when we did predator prey. So remember in round one, if the hare got out of control, then the link were able to kind of smash them down. But because the hare got out of control, the link died off. So what would control the hare? Well, maybe there's not enough grass, so that would keep the hare. So everything kind of controls each other to balance stuff out into equilibriums, right? From the tiniest algae to the largest animal on Earth, the blue whale, they all rely on each other. They're all very, very important to an ecosystem. And so in a healthy ecosystem, and these are terms we've talked about before, there's a give and take relationship and everything goes into equilibrium, which means everything is balanced in a healthy ecosystem. But here's the thing. Biodiversity is in danger when we throw off an ecosystem and do a few things to it. So we end up crushing the equilibrium. So let's look at some things we do. So causes of known animal extinctions, well, some of them we hunted out of extinction, other ones because we decided to build a strip mall where they lived, and then other ones because of invasive species, basically, species introduction, invasive species, just like we talked about. Okay, and this is all just in the last 500 years. That's when we started like traveling across the seas and moving around and really bringing stuff to other places. So we benefit from biodiversity hugely, and we talked about some of those reasons. And then the primary cause of species loss currently is because of us. So let's look at some things we're doing. So we're destroying habitats. So this is kind of slash and burn farming or tree logging.
Clear cutting. Looks like
Clear
clear
cutting.
cutting.
Yeah. And same thing here. We just go in and take out all the trees. And it went from being a beautifully diverse forest to basically a dust bowl.
And then even if we could go back in and plant, usually we just plant one species of tree that we want.
So the York Regional Forest, which kind of goes all the way across the top of the 905, it was clear cut, and in the 30s and 40s was actually like a big sand dune, and they planted trees again there in like the 50s, and it's not until maybe about 30 years, 20 years ago where it actually has gone back into being a stable forest. Pollution, so we either dump stuff into the water or into the ground. We're putting all kinds of terrible stuff in the atmosphere, and that pollution impacts life. I mean, would you want to be a fish living in this little pond here, or would you want to be a tree breathing this stuff in? Not really, right?
Or a bird, like the lorax.
Yeah, like the lorax.
They can't sing.
Or this stuff will mix with the water and come back down as acid rain, right? We don't want to be dealing with that either. So, okay, invasive species. There's our favorite little zebra mussel, right? They're actually really good at cleaning the water. So good, in fact, that there's no nutrients left for anybody else. Here's the purple loosestrife. It's a weed, and it'll go over and just take over a field.
Marshes especially.
Yeah, exactly. And then nothing really wants to eat them. So let's see, climate change. These polar bears, I mean, as we melt the ice, these ones are actually stranded. They're going to die trying to swim back. But, we're taking away their habitat, right? We're melting the ice quicker. We've created, this used to be a nice little savanna, but since we've
desertification.
We desertificated it. This one is a forest fire caused by us.
Yeah, if you looked at the forest fire increases in places like Australia, BC, California, way increasing over the last few years.
Yeah,
dangerously so because
1-2 degrees makes a huge difference, right?
And it's dry, right?
Yep.
Like the heat keeps it dry.
Exploitation. I mean, this tiger looks good in a zoo, right? Well, we go pull
That's a liger.
A liger, sorry.
That's a liger.
Is it?
Yeah, that's a liger. We've bred a tiger and a lion together.
Hunting off of bears.
Circuses.
Yeah.
Right, so using animals for our own amusement.
Okay. And so we've destroyed many of the biodiverse areas. We create monocultures. So like we go and chop down a forest where there's thousands of species and we plant just rows of corn where there's only one species. So like this, right? Or palm oil. Palm oil is terrible. Yeah. Palm oil is absolutely horrendous. There's a thing you can find on YouTube called Before the Flood. Leo DiCaprio, he talks a lot about the palm oil stuff. There we go. Palm trees and it's palm oil. So it's a big business, but we've cut down like rainforests. And I'm talking about a little, like I'm talking about a lot. And then since plants are responsible for supporting many animals, we cut down all these trees. Well, they're gone too. And then any animals that move into those palm oils, we just kill off because they eat the palm, and we don't want that, right? So another big one, and this is the one that you'll end up doing if you're in the urban encroachment, is we go and we build cities. Louise Arbor, where the school was, I remember driving up to Mayfield in high school to play rugby, and it was surrounded by farm and marsh. So it used to be ducks and marshland where our football field is. Now it's all houses. We typically grow our cities in the places where we also grow our food, and then we grow our food in places where typically you have a lot of biodiversity, right? So uh, urban sprawl, right? So that's another big one. Um, so the question is like, we want to put more houses, we want to live more people, but how can we support people without damaging the ecosystems? I mean, I guess you can build buildings higher, I suppose. But I mean, that's currently the $1 million question, right? If you could find a solution to that, then go for it, right? I know there's lots of interesting things out there, like doing vertical farming and stuff like that. But yeah, so it's a big challenge. And it really hasn't been since like maybe the last 30 years that we've really kind of noticed this coming in a kind of in a way where a lot of people know about it. So we're kind of already down the path of growing really fast before we knew how bad it was. So it's really a big area, and this stuff interests you. There's lots of room for you to get into industry and make this your career and your life. So there's going to be a little video here that you can go and watch afterwards, and you can get that from the PowerPoint. And that's about it. That's all we got for biodiversity. So hopefully you enjoyed these 4 lessons, and that's about all we have for you. Anything else you want to add?
No, I don't think
Okay,
so. I think that covered it pretty well.
awesome. Okay, well, take care, everyone, and stay tuned for later on in the week. We'll be posting some more stuff.
Take care.